morning, everybody. You're all right? I just had a gallon of coffee, so I'm feeling good. So I'm the chief data scientist of Accenture. So hopefully I'm in a room full of geeks and we can geek out a bit. There's always a danger when you ask me to talk that I'll just talk about what I want. Oh, T-Rob. Hey, fella. So I'm going to talk about what I like, which is what I call the Great GenAI Compression, which hopefully will give us a bunch of thinking around how we need to set ourselves up for success with some of this stuff. And I've only ever worked on AI. It's all I've ever done for 25 years. So I'm quite annoyed by this whole GenAI situation. And I'm also, my topic is text. So I'm triple annoyed. But we're going to have some fun. First of all, and hopefully you'll appreciate my electronic art. I use it all the time to demonstrate that it doesn't really work very well. But when I started many, many moons ago, I was sent to New York, to the New York Stock Exchange, to help them with investigations. Text expert investigations, and the way they do investigations is that they'll go and get documents from a bank or whatever, and so I arrived there, and the chief investigator looked at me, and I said, well, but how do you work? And she said, well, look out the window, and there was a long, long, long line of UPS vans. I couldn't get it to do the color right. It came out white. And actually, the vans at the end looked like strange things from a horror movie. And she said, well, that line is one customer. As one customer, there's 20 million documents in there printed out in boxes. I said, okay, and what do you do with that? And she said, well, it's reasonably easy. We print them all out, and we lay them out in a hanger, and we go through them with a highlighter. So this is me, 23 years old, AI expert looking, what? I said to her, and she was awesome, by the way. She says, what happens if the judge decides to change the words? He wants to look for other words. She says, it's easy. We just print another copy, put them next door, and use a different color highlighter. So this was, what, 2002 or something? It's not that far away that we were in the ice ages of working with this stuff. Anyway, so at the time we created something to organize things and to classify things, and to be honest, much of the use cases that I'm seeing today are no different to what we were trying to do then. They just didn't work. So now they kind of work, right? But it's important to take a moment to think. It wasn't that long ago that we were in the ice ages, and certainly for the world of text, GenAI has done a lot of marvelous things for people like me who struggled. Again, please appreciate my electronic art. I worked for hours on it. I always start presentations with a hallucination. This is my favorite one at the moment. After a very, very lovely company brought out their latest version, I was writing, I think it was a CNN or something. Anyway, for those of you that are scientists, I was mucking around writing a neural net, and for some reason, I thought I'd got something wrong, how I was doing the pooling layer. So I said, well, I'm doing something wrong. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And this marvelous thing said, no problem, Fernando. You're not applying this correctly. The right answer is that, and the right answer is that. That and that are the same things. So what's wrong is this, and what's right is also this. The reason I start here is that we have to take a moment and think, we love these things for what they know of language, but we don't love them because of what they know of knowledge, and we certainly don't love them for what they know of reasoning. To take a moment. Yeah? And so this is our pause moment, and then we'll have some fun. Right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about experiences. I'm hoping you're all technical. I'm not going to patronize you, but I obsess about this a bit. At the moment, the perception of many of your customers and the people you work with is that there's a model out there. I mean, let's not pick on OpenAI. They're lovely and fantastic. I don't care which one you pick. But we all have this perception that we have these things called models that do these marvelous things and answer questions and all this stuff. And the reality, as you guys will know, is that it's not like that. It's actually more like a compendium of models connected together with orchestration and other things to do interesting things. Now, the reason this is materially important, I'm sorry, I should explain why I put this down here. Did you see the launch of this OpenAI 4.0? Did you see the two-phone situation? Did anyone of you think that it was horrific?
Cringe.
Because, well, you say cringe, but it's for people that are maybe not in our world. This is a simulation of agency. Do you see what I mean? So my mom sits there and goes, "Oh my God, these things are talking to each other. They have agency." They don't have agency. There's just two programs that they can't. They're in a loop. They can't get out of the loop. You ask, I answer. I answer. You constantly in the loop. So I think we're bordering on the, as you say, cringe. Oh God, take a moment, people, please. But the reason this is important, and you'll excuse my big layer cake thing, is that the distance between the experiences, OpenAI is an experience, not a model, yes? It's an experience, yes? And the models is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is not a judgment, by the way. We all need all of these things. But it just means that as we're working together, and Tiro and I talk about this all the time, as we're working together trying to navigate, because maybe we're in government or in a bank and we can't start with the experience, we're navigating from the models and we're trying to build things and do it sensibly, we're navigating up these layers and there's a lot of work, there's a bunch of science, there's a bunch of engineering, and then there's the experience. This distance gets bigger and bigger and bigger for all of us. And we can make choices to only start at the top, but that has its own dangers as well, right? So this is an important sort of moment. And by the way, for today, just for this meeting, I've added the agentic architecture layer. Don't judge me. It's the thing now. Everybody has to have agentic architectures. For people like me that have been in AI a long time, AI agents are a thing. There's a definition. They do something very specific. It is not this. But we are doing enough engineering now that you start needing architectures that are sensible to start doing work that is more like I call it like the common coding, the object-oriented coding of AI, right? Let's start doing reusable things. But all of this, again, the important point I'm trying to make to you guys is this idea that from all the way from your data, there's actually a long journey now, and the journey is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and your customers are more and more and more confused about, I think I want that experience. But actually, Tiro, you and I discussed this. It's a bit like search. Remember in search, if anybody's done enterprise search, when the customers want, why doesn't it work like Google? Because Google is an experience. And I'm trying to give you a tool, and I'm trying to build it up. So the experiences are getting far from this. So I'm going to do a little bit of an exercise, like a mind exercise. And let's start here. So when I talk about the compression, what I mean is that companies tend to have stages in life where you're growing towards being an adult in a particular topic, right? It is what it is. Big companies don't turn around on a dime. It's just not how it works. And you start thinking, what are the sources of potentially the anxiety we're living today? And hopefully you can have some giggles with me, but you got the hype is big, right? The fear of missing out is massive. You know, every CEO is like, I need GenAI because my friend CEO at the golf course says I need it. The innovation is truly, truly bonkers. But there's not been a leapfrog, right? So we did attention, and since attention, we're all living off this attention thing. So but it's truly crazy the amount of innovation, right? So all these things, and then we have the potential of all this value of savings. Is potential. I'm using the word potential very carefully here. Yeah. Not everything is proven yet. We're all trying to figure this out and stuff like that. And then for our people, it's the first time in history where we have a technology that everybody in the company can use because they only have to know English, French, Spanish, a human language, right? That's all they need to know to be participating. It's never happened before. At the same time, it's never happened before that a technology has no manual. There has no way for you to know what it does and doesn't do. The other day I was talking to somebody and I said, well, these models are unhinged. And they were thinking that I was being negative. I said, no, I was being descriptive. They are unhinged, period. We're training them with the knowledge of the world, and then we're untraining them with all the negatives. We're untraining them of all the things that they shouldn't know, right? It's unhinged. And I don't mean that negatively, because I love them as much as anybody. But our employees are loving it. Access is super easy. If you don't give access to your people, they'll just find it. All these things. So all of this stuff kind of gives us this anxiety to act. Right? But in big companies, this doesn't work like that. So let's talk about the stages that I think, and by the way, you can come up after me and tell me what I've missed, so I can add it to my story. But let's use this paradigm of the desert. By the way, in this particular little thinking exercise, water is data. Water, the water of life is data. And the greenery might be what you're building, the applications you're building. So stage number one, which is probably where everybody was 3 years ago, 80% of companies in reality at scale, and we're talking AI, no analytics, yes? Let's be very clear, AI, not analytics. We're probably here. They had a lab. The data was very controlled, fit for purpose for the lab, a few people doing some work, maybe a couple of projects, CEO mostly not caring at all. It's all good fun. And it's not the same for every industry, but on average, this was true, right? Where the time to value is very long, we've been working on this price optimization using reinforcement learning for 3 years. Okay, great, fantastic. We're all learning how to use the technology. So stage one is where everybody was, maybe 80% of people were about 3 or 4 years ago. The next stage is the forest. Obviously, in the forest, there's a lot more water, so there's a lot more data available. There's more greenery. We're doing more things. Now, what needs to be true in the AI forest? A bunch of things need to be true. You probably need a chief data scientist. Please employ us. We like jobs. It's good for us. But you probably need a chief data scientist to guide the exercise, guide the strategy. How are we going to use this? It's a very technocratic problem, so how do we educate everybody to know how to use it? We start seeing more of the CEO focus, but the CEO focus here is more of the, what are you spending my money on? Where's the value in this? What are you doing? You know that pricing optimization you were doing with reinforcement learning? Does it work? Because if it doesn't, let's get it out. We start thinking about professionalization. I mean, we're here in a room, hopefully people are coming here to use a tool that is designed to professionalize. That's what it does. That's what it's done for us, right, T-Row? That's how we use it. So we need to professionalize maybe outside the data science organization. Who does what, where, when around us that is useful? And finally, where's mine? Oh, this one. The time to value starts being much smaller. Hey, now you have 60 data scientists, and they're all working, and they're all professionalized. How many things are you cranking for me that have value? I mean, they may not be reinforcement learning, I jest, and maybe 80% of the time, logistic regressions in reality. So it may not even be AI. All right, so here we have 15 or 20% of the companies 3 years ago, okay? So let's go to the semi-final stage. So the semi-final stage is the AI jungle, where I joke, by the way, that 3 years ago, 2 years ago, no one was in the jungle. Jungle is a farcical place that nobody lives in. Why? Because nobody has data that is just available that you can just use. That's just not true. And will never be true. It'll be an evolution. But you can have customers. There's a couple of European customers, banks that are nearly there. You're in a situation that because the data is so available, the tooling is available. You can use any tooling. You don't have to be a data scientist to use the tooling. The company has grown to know how to do this safely. So whatever your role is in the company, you have access to the tooling at your right level, you can do what you need to do. You start seeing why it's kind of a farcical, non-real place. And of course, at that point, because your choices are nothing to do with tooling or data, you can just do what you think is right because the tooling works and the data is available, you start seeing that you have things that need 10 times value, 100 times value, because you can make really good choices, right? It is farcical, right? This doesn't exist. But maybe a year and a half ago, what I would say to a strategist or the CEO of a company is, well, you need to set up an AI organization that points to the jungle. You may never get there, but you need to work in that method because this is democratizing more and more things available, more people are being educated, more university degrees, more. So at some point, you're going to need all that safety at scale and the governance and all. You're going to need these things no matter if the picture I'm painting is a bit like an extreme of goodness. Yeah? So what do I call the GenAI compression? The GenAI compression for me is the fact that all of us are being asked to basically jump the desert, the forest, the jungle, directly to my little picture of a black hole, directly to the end. Right? That's what we're being asked. Is do GenAI. Just do it. And you turn around and say, well, yes, okay, well, where's the value, though? And how do we set up the digital core so it works? So we've got layers of technology that actually do something useful. And, God, this, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, there's my point on language. This thing, you can't trust this thing. How do we control this? And you get palpitations, right? Or how does it change the way we work? There's all these questions of, is it going to replace people? No, in our experience, nobody's going anywhere. But you still have that anxiety. So all of these things are happening. And of course, it's coming even faster, so how do I deal with the future? So all this is making us feel compressed, like we have to make some choices across these 3 stages. Yeah? And the reality is exactly that, is that companies cannot jump the stages. What they have to do is make choices. They need investment. There's a bunch of things that are needed for us to survive this. Another piece of this that I wanted to fulfill for you in this is that when you look at thousands of customers, thousands of use cases, you start having a very macro view of the world. I use this paradigm to explain it. On one hand, in what's now, does anybody hear the terms classical AI like it's like from last century? It's comedy. In AI, maybe if you're doing reinforcement learning, you're probably going to do that once a year. It's quite hard. It needs to be embedded into a pricing engine. These are quite serious things. It's a program, right? So you're probably going to do that a few times. That's your big projects view. And that's still there, and we still do it, even though we're distracted. The problem with GenAI is that that's not the way it's going to work. What it is thousands of interventions. Summarizing a call where every call center agent has to spend 8 minutes summarizing a call, removing those 8 minutes is wonderful and fantastic, but it's an intervention. It's not the thing in itself. So you've got this balance now of how do I deal with the fact that some things are going to be big projects and I'm going to do 5 a year, and if to make GenAI work and make it look valuable, I'm going to have to do thousands of interventions, lots of interventions, because the 8-minute thing for a company that has, I'm going to make it up, 50,000 call center agents, the number is magnificent just for one thing, but on average, that's not how it works. So we're going to have to look at a portfolio of areas where all the interventions together sum up to value, right? So then, how do I set myself up? And what we're seeing is two ways, and I'm going to propose a third. One of them is this incremental thing where I'm just going to go do little use case, No, I'm going to increment. And maybe I build some systems as I go. Hope. This is the hope path. Yeah? It's not working out, by the way, the hope path. Because you're not building the future, you're not getting reusability, you're not doing these things. But oh my God, are you doing little things by the millions? The other path is this idea of the moonshot, where you're kind of building your platforms, you're building version 1 of platforms, you're building version 1 of operating model and safety. And when you're ready, you see the little curve that goes, beep, you start doing use cases really quickly, but then it tails off again. Why? Because that kind of setup, that kind of moonshot setup requires a lot of initial calories. You're throwing a lot at it very quickly, and you effectively think, I'm done. I've done version 1, let's go. Now you start building, and you lose the energy for continuing the growth and continuing the evolution. And I want you to think about this, because we're kind of stuck as an industry between these two models. Some go one way, some go the other. And what we need is kind of a way in the middle where you're set up for a continuous evolution, because it is what it is. The example I use is this agentic architectures where things like LangChain and other lovely products like that, they don't pass black duck open source tests. Not yet. So we're going to have to use what's available until it becomes a bit more mature, right? So have a think about this, because it's important as you look at the evolution of the problem within your own firm, you're going to have to consider all these things as part of the evolution. And there is no answer, so don't look for an answer. Look for how am I going to set up the evolution, right? Now, I do want to give you a couple of minutes on the next frontier. Please appreciate my electronic art. When you're doing it for this kind of thing, it works perfectly. But when you're trying to use it for anything more serious, for me, it just doesn't work. But this one came out very nicely. The thoughtful robot. The next frontier for these LLMs, for me, is reasonably simple. It's reasoning. Why? Because at the moment they don't do reasoning. Please, let's take a moment. Let's breathe. Just because somebody is trained OpenAI to know all the common sense kind of tests that we have in humanity doesn't mean that it's actually having common sense. It's just really good at remembering all the things we've trained it about common sense. Now, why is reasoning in business hard? Because we have orthodoxies, because common sense hardly exists, because we have politics, because we're lazy. There's also lots of positive things. But you see what I mean? As human beings, we're not perfect in our reasoning methods within companies, so why would we assume the things that are created as experiences for the common people will work as reasoning methods for ours? So problem number one, reasoning at the moment doesn't work. And one thing I want you to think about as well is the manipulation of language that these things do now runs out of runway of things to do. It just runs out of runway. At which point you needed to do a little bit of reasoning for it to become more valuable to us. See what I mean by that? Summarization of calls, classification, intents, creating me an email, you run out of runway on that, and you start thinking, well, what I actually needed to do is to take this little process and tell me what are the 3 or 4 variations of this I should do, and suddenly you start having derivations of reasoning that this thing doesn't do, or these things don't do. So in companies, it's quite complicated. And then the classification of reasoning is well, I've done it upside down, don't matter. The classification of how we have to think of reasoning is also interesting. So if you think of reasoning as an interesting problem, you have things like common sense, right? If I jump out of a window, I probably will hurt myself. Versus the Oxford entry test. If I have a jug with 5 liters and a jug with 3 liters, how can I empty them and fill them to get 1 liter? A bit of reasoning there. Versus something like exploratory reasoning, where I give you a very random job, go find the Accenture office, have fun, which is quite easy to do, but to a machine now, we would have to train it exactly on how to deal with that, whereas you guys will figure it out. You will explore the problem space and deal with it, or the famous, inference thinking, deductive thinking, like Sherlock Holmes and all these things. And there's quite a lot of different sort of scientific reasoning. There's all of these classes of reasoning that we embody in one brain that we have to train these machines to do very, very specifically. So there is no, at the moment, flexibility on this. So for me, this has to be the next evolution, because the tooling just comes to the point where it's just okay, it knows language really well. Amazing, awesome. I needed to do something more now. And by the way, when I say reasoning, planning is the same, right? Planning a problem and all these kind of things. So for me, it's about thinking a little bit, if you go summarize what we've heard, wonderful technology, massively interesting. We need to figure out how to deal with the evolution of our company because we can't jump stages, right? And we also have to remember that as we are trying to figure out the stages and make our company work and use data science and other tools sensibly, there'll be people like me who'll be pushing things like reasoning. I'm saying it's not there, but there'll be others saying it is there, and there'll be all this push for new innovations. So our job is to keep all of these things contained in a thought space where we can traverse it and create plans to deliver. That's our job as data science leads. Certainly is mine, and my team is probably reasonably big compared to an average, right? Hopefully that helps. It's not the end. Is it the beginning? Is it the end? I don't know, T-Rob, you tell me.
It's a circle.
It's a circle. It's a circle, T-Rob says. You must believe it if he says it. And that's where I am. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.